In the words of the comic and author Terrence Williams, come on in, come on in. We're waiting for you to come on in. We're going to go ahead and get started. How you guys doing? Let's talk today about the subtle subversion of science. It's a pretty good one. Now, recently in today's world, we have begun to hear a phrase that to me is quite ironic. Trust the science, or the science is settled. Being rattled off to people whenever a discussion about the severity of the COVID virus or with the efficacy of the experimental vaccine. When a normal Joe like myself hears this, I immediately went straight to science in order to get this info that I was apparently missing. Upon digging into it all, I found that this rally cry was flawed, to say the least. Science is a process established hundreds of years ago using what's called the scientific method, which holds that regimented testing must be done and then a rigorous peer review process that relies on collaboration amongst the scientific leaders of the day. And then when looking back at this time 3 years ago, I see no peer reviews showing that masks worked or that mandates helped. In fact, many scientists attempted to get the truth out with what their findings were, only to be censored across all media. This was not science. And without those experts to explain to us what they'd found in their studies, we were left to attempt to find it all out on our own. And it's at this time that it all dawned on me. While trying to sift through all of the information on, say, viruses, coronaviruses, PCR testing, mRNA tech, virus mutation, gain of function research, etc., I found that it would be almost impossible for a regular person, that is to say a non-scientist, a non-doctor, to ever determine what is right and what is wrong with any of this information. So from there, I sought out the opinions and knowledge of experts. While many had been censored, I was able to track many down in other ways or other social media companies and was surprised by what I had found. I found that while many could help in certain ways, in other ways they could not. And I discovered that this is due to this institution becoming highly, highly compartmentalized. It's how governments work. It's how the military works. It seems as though, as with our military and our government, that at some point it gets so specialized in certain areas, or these institutions get so large, creating situations where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Now, I don't know if this is on purpose or just a result of the two possible reasons that I suggested, but in any event, I realize that this is virtually impossible for Joe Smith from any town, USA, to personally determine what science is pure and true and which science is corrupt and false, leaving most people with having to simply take the word of whichever doctor or specialist that they happen to be speaking with at the time. This was alarming to me. There used to be a time when common folk could easily understand science and medicine. It seemed somehow simpler. In fact, they grew their medicine in their backyard and understood which herb helped with which illness or ailment. But today, one can't even read through an introductory course on anatomy without having to have a prerequisite course in Latin. It seems that somehow it became too complicated. And I already know what you're thinking. What you're saying, well, it's complicated stuff. And we'd better be happy that our heart doctor went through 15 extra years of schooling in order to be our physician. But I question that. And I'm not a science denier. I understand full well the complexity of such things, like viruses or the human body. But let me pose a thought experiment to both of you guys that are listening. For tens of thousands, well, actually for millions of years, hundreds of thousands for sure, women have had children, obviously. But it's only the last few hundred years or so that we have professional midwives, and less than 100 years since we've had OBGYN doctors, gynecologists. So how, for hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years, did women have babies? And yes, I understand the birthing death rates were higher then for both the mother and the child, and we've come leaps and bounds. But is this because of the new doctors called OBGYNs? Or would over time these practices utilized by OBGYNs, would they have become common practice eventually? Sanitation and hygiene would be one huge advantage for lowering any adverse risks to the mother or child. We've come a long way in that in modern times. Could many of these techniques used by today's specialists had been discovered over time, organically, just simply through repetition, over hundreds of years, thousands of years? How could women have given birth with no professional help for hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, but now the only person who can deliver a baby is someone who had to get 10 extra years of college in order to qualify to do so? It sure seems to have been terribly complicated and obfuscated through this compartmentalization phenomenon, which seems to have occurred as I laid out earlier. So let's take a look at how this might happen and see if it's something natural or something done by you-know-who, the ones that I speak about in every video. The story must begin during a period that is known as the Renaissance, maybe around 1543, when Nicholas Copernicus published his paper on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres, kicking off what has become known as the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution is a name given to that period of drastic change in scientific thought that took place during the 16th and 17th centuries. It replaced the Greek view of nature that had dominated science for almost 2,000 years. Science became an automated discipline, distinct from both philosophy and technology, and came to be regarded as having a utilitarian goals. And folks, utilitarianism has a real funny definition and kind of looks a lot like this greater good bullshit that I rail against and call out every chance I can. Utilitarianism is an ethical theory that holds that the right action is the one that maximizes aggregate well-being. Greater good. Red flags. That's all I'm saying. Now, this is an incredibly complex subject with an absolute ton of information to have to touch on, so much of it isn't going to be really backed up as we go along. You'll have to kind of fact check a lot of this later on your own because I won't be doing it here. This time period seems to be embodied by three main ideas. To start was Copernicus's paper on the heliotropic universe, as I mentioned, followed by Galileo publishing his paper on inertia in 1600, along with William Gilbert's discovery of the magnetic poles that same year. Some of the main functions of this revolution was ascertaining facts about our physical world through the scientific method, and then building upon that through the new ability to collaborate in a better way with the invention of the printing press and the ability for information to move exponentially faster. With new discoveries occurring And with this info moving around the world much quicker, it allowed for theories to be built upon one another much faster. It was this collaboration that would become the precursor to what we know as the scientific establishment. The scientific establishment then began to grow, and as science moved from superstitions to mathematics, and as these theories became more complicated and layered with preceding theories, then a situation occurs where only the smartest or the well-versed in these subjects can even understand them. 19th century scholar, scientist, and historian William Whewell, or Whewell, described this revolution as such, quote, "Among the most conspicuous of the revolutions which opinions on this subject have undergone is the transition from an implicit trust in the internal powers of man's mind to a professed dependence upon external observation." You see that? It says to no longer trust your brain, your mind, but instead to depend on quote unquote external observation. Well, now, if you'd like to research if you'd like to research the spooky action between electrons, you couldn't do so because you don't have the lab and the lab equipment to do it. So you can't conduct an external observation. And instead, you must rely on someone else to do it for you. You see how that works now? You know, as Whewell said, you don't go with your mind. Depend on external observation instead. And when we get to a point where we're trying to look at this spooky behavior between electrons, as Einstein called it, how am I going to do this in my garage? How are you going to do it? You're not. You cannot. You have to depend on someone else's external observation. That's not normally a problem as long as everyone involved is trustworthy and not controlled in any way. But just take a look at what happened with COVID. Go look at some of the things that were said by top scientists in the early days of the pandemic. Go look at some of the FOIA Fauci emails and notice the collaboration, or should I say collusion. This is an example of how this collaboration with the science establishment can go terribly wrong. These scientists knew that the virus was made in a lab and were beginning to go public with it. However, after a few email exchanges with the good Dr. Fauci, it seems that the science and medical establishment, who's in charge of having to use the scientific method in order to verify things, couldn't quite verify the fact that this was man-made in a lab. And without some high up, some top-level scientist and his or her team verifying this, then it never becomes official, even though most everyone with their eyes half open can see what it is that has occurred. But yet here we are. You could extrapolate that onto the mask debate as well. Again, the establishment doesn't and didn't allow for any collaborated peer review science to come out with regard to mask efficacy. And so many states continue to this day to mandate the wearing of masks. Again, nothing can change until a top-level group of scientists can collaborate a new theory or hypothesis. And when the top of this clique is controlled by the bloodlines, now you get the picture. In modern times, most new theories are experimented on by groups of scientists, mostly, it seems, done by groups or departments from universities, like, say, Stanford Physics Department doing an experiment on gluons. Well, this takes money and equipment. And that money many times comes from outside sources, specific grants, etc. And so with that, dear listeners, comes a certain amount of control. What we have here is a high-tech experiment that takes expensive equipment and must be conducted by a well-funded team. And so ask yourself how a regular person, not affiliated with any official scientific groups, could conduct any of this work by themselves. They can't. So they must rely on the establishment. This scientific revolution allowed for the building upon a theory, allowing the theories to get more precise, and with each new dig on that theory, however, when one thinks the process through, we can see that when groups build upon a theory, as we're describing, they're taking all preceding theories as factual, and I don't blame them. But that could be dangerous if one of those theories along the line is twisted or even an outright lie. I'll present another example, and we'll most surely get some flack for this, but take the theory of relativity. Einstein came up with his theory using the foundation laid by Isaac Newton 250 years earlier. The problem is that Newton was wrong about quite a bit. That's not a crazy statement. That's a fact, obviously, because Einstein built on it and corrected it. Newton concluded that objects fall because they're pulled by Earth's gravity. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, general relativity, gravity is much weirder than that. It's a natural consequence of a mass's influence on space. Einstein agreed with Newton that space had dimension, width, length, and height, but the key difference between Einstein and Newton gravity is that Einstein described that gravity is a curvature in a four-dimension space-time fabric, proportional to object masses, whereas Newton described gravity as a force expressed mutually between two objects in relation to their masses. Okay, so Newton was wrong about a bunch of stuff. However, for 250 years, the whole world went along with his theory as being factual. And this is what was taught in the schools and the universities at the time, etc. So, while Einstein eventually presents a mathematical theory that works, it was built upon false data to begin with. Is it possible to make it all work mathematically, but yet have it still be wrong? I mean, that's just a matter of probability, right? Statistics. Punch in enough numbers. You'll eventually get it, right? Apparently, Newton was wrong. His theory was wrong, but nobody knew it for 250 years. What if they're both wrong? What if after hundreds of years and tens of thousands of possible mathematical equations attempted by Einstein, it finally worked? Did it work? Is Einstein's theory correct? I mean, at the end of the day, we are told that based on this theory, that in the beginning there was a small single point of very, very dense energy, and then boom, a big bang, and then everything began to expand and came into being. So something out of nothing. Does that make sense to any of you? Hey, Robert. I wanted to tell you thank you about that yesterday. Right back at you, man. So something out of nothing. Does that make sense to you guys? It doesn't to me. Probably not to a lot of you. But do you question it at all? Most don't. Why? Because they don't know, so they must defer. Defer to whom? Well, they got to defer to the current science establishment. We can't do any of these experiments on our own. Now, let me ask you guys, what if both Newton and Einstein are wrong? And Einstein just built a false theory upon a false theory. And after 250 years of punching in different combinations of equations, they finally got one to work. However, you've got to believe that something exploded out of nothing. So, What if they're both wrong? What if gravity doesn't even exist? There seems to be a theory out there that seems to hold a lot of weight when it comes to this. So there's a theory that seems to hold a lot of weight when it comes to the fact that gravity doesn't exist. And many of you guys will probably have heard about it. It's David Talbot's electric universe theory. In a nutshell, this theory shows that electricity can do all of the things that Newton and Einstein claim that only gravity can do. Electricity has David Talbot shows that electricity has both propulsion and attraction properties. And so every single thing that they say is by gravity could be attributed to electricity. Look into it if you've got some time. Read some Velikovsky. If the electrical universe theory can be confirmed, which I believe that it can, then everything that Newton and Einstein claimed is wrong. The electrical universe theory could change everything that we think we believe immediately. And that can't be understated. And so, as you would imagine, the establishment would never let this theory be peer-reviewed. They immediately discounted as pseudoscience. In fact, in exactly the same way that they did with the pioneer of the electric universe theory, Professor Velikovsky, completely ruining the man's career, blackballing him from science completely, if you look into it. I mean, they tore that man up, took his books off the shelves. And so imagine a linchpin theory such as relativity, gravity, and it's unequivocally proven wrong by this new theory. That theory that holds together much of what we think we know about our physical world today. It could all come crashing down overnight. For me, being a conspiracy theorist, I'm not so sure that this is all organic. I wouldn't put it past the controllers to have pushed and tailored those early theories towards what they are today in an attempt to hide the real truths that lead to new real truths that eventually open a door that the controllers don't want opened. This would explain the tight hold that the establishment keeps on its info, never letting newcomers with new theories into the fold. Almost a good old boy system in place, protecting the old guard and the old theories. Something we can get into at another time is that by blocking Velikovsky and other similar theories along the way, electric universe, it helps them to hide the fact that giants once walked the earth, or that the earth itself was a corpse or is a corpse. I think that was that stated by Paul the Apostle? Somebody out there will know. And these are subjects that we could get into another time. Those are the giants and the earth being a corpse. There's some very, very interesting subjects. But I just want to, that's what got me started, is the giants. Yeah, Enoch, probably, right, Ranger? So I wanted to put it out there in order to show you how big these theories are from Talbot and Velikovsky. No pun intended, right? How big these theories are. Because, like the theory of giants, because Velikovsky talks about the giants. Well, what he says is that Venus, you got to get into it, but Venus heated up, got spit out from Saturn, came close to us. We had electrical activity between the two planets, causing the Grand Canyon and other monoliths around, and then it was so heated that water or liquid rained down, hot mud from Venus rained down on the Earth, and when it did, it immediately embalms whatever it hits. And so anyway, if you go into it, there's a reason that they would hide these, that they won't even peer review these things. They won't even let Electric Universe into the game at all. And they've been at it for 15 years, pretty hard. Still not letting them in. But back to the scientific revolution, of course, that time period produced many breakthroughs that changed humanity for the better, like the scientific method, which is infallible for the most part and is definitely the way that it should be done. It's just that since the scientific revolution occurred, it seems as though science has gotten way too complicated for normal folks. And even if you are well-versed in a specific subject, it could make a particular subject that you could make sense of it, you can't, because everything seems to become so specialized that one now must become an expert within a specialized portion of a field in order to speak on it. It's problematic. In the beginning, this scientific revolution was probably wholesome and efficient, but I suspect over time, as this helped contribute to a new scientific establishment, that this new scientific establishment was co-opted, as with every institution that exists. This establishment is now simply a gatekeeper for the controllers, only allowing info and theories that work to justify their ends, their quote-unquote great work. Now, I was hoping we'd have a few more people that we could discuss some of this. How many of you think that I'm crazy for questioning Einstein's theory of relativity? Doing something like that would be scientific suicide if you were in that industry. But I hope I raised some good points. I hope it got you guys thinking a little bit. I would love to hear some feedback on what you guys think. I was a little bit leery of putting it out because I didn't want to be called a science denier. I didn't want to be called a kook. So, Robert says, when researching truth, I think it's safe to say it with often be found. Dang it. Now, how do I see these things, man? I missed you, Bob. Damn it. I didn't get to the gist of it, Bob, but researching truth it's frustrating. It's tough. As you know, you don't know who in the hell to trust, where to go. And you have to assume, especially on YouTube, you have to assume that they're going to feed you things that are made to deceive you, deceptive things. Which reminds me, I have a Rumble, mainstream news watcher, same thing, on Rumble. I'm sure you guys could find it. If you guys want to subscribe to that, I don't know, I'm at found down the path that the controllers try to hide and destroy. Absolutely, that's it. You're right, Robert, and that's what we have to do. We have to find it somewhere. It's not going to look pretty. It's not going to look shiny. It's not going to look like what you're looking for, is it? But it's going to look like an old dirty shoe, but it's going to be gold. The stuff that's presented to you, that's all glittery and shiny, you don't want that. You don't want it at all. That's fake. But real quick, if you guys could subscribe to Rumble, I'm at 85 or 90 subscribers. If we get to 100, I can do live streams there, and maybe we can start doing it over there, or I can do it there in addition to this. But YouTube is really dying. I mean, I see, and it's probably John Lemon brought it up yesterday in another older video. He commented that I lose subscribers, or have in the past, because those accounts that were subscribing to me are now banned. And he makes a great point. That would explain losing subscribership daily during this period of time when they really came at us all with the censorship. So that's a really good point. But maybe if we go over to Rumble, we can do them over there and grow it over there. I think that's going to be the future. I think that there will eventually be some fascist stuff going on with YouTube that we're seeing with Twitter right now. And I think that YouTube's going to crumble. Either they're going to get sued out of existence, or they'll collapse under their own corruption. So I think Rumble might be the future. So we'll try and grow that. If you guys want to subscribe over there, that'd be awesome. Just Mainstream News Watcher. What I do is I usually post here first. I've been doing live here. I'll do an edited upload of the same presentation on Rumble, usually that day or the next day. And then I have a Substack. Now that's under a different name. I'll put a link in the description. And what I do there is I transcribe all the presentations, and then I put them in article form on Substack. So since I'm banned from everywhere, this is a good way of reaching a bunch of people. I'm reaching a little bit through the Substack. We're reaching a little bit through the Rumble, and we used to reach a whole bunch through YouTube, but we're not reaching many at all. And a lot of the big accounts from YouTube that used to put out a video, I don't know, you guys know BCP? You ever watch BCP? Used to watch him all through 2017 through 2020, 2021. And I ran across one of his videos the other day. He used to get 150,000 views every time he put something out. Now he's getting 10 or 15,000. That's 10% of what he used to get. So, and it's not just him. There's all kinds of old accounts that I used to go and watch, some news people and some others that are just, I mean, everything's down really bad. So obviously it's from censoring and kicking off people who speak truth, but then it's also, I think, dying because just more and more people are just leaving. So anyway, Rumble, I don't have to leave a link or anything. It's just, Mainstream News Watcher over there. So I appreciate you guys joining me. And we'll do a Freemason presentation probably next week. So thank you guys for joining me. I really, really appreciate it.